some people become very paranoid and they, oh, good heavens, if telepathy is real, other people know what I'm thinking. I won't have any privacy.
Yeah.
And this, yeah, you're absolutely right. Of course, this is completely irrational, but it can be countered by accurate information. Telepathy demonstrates a connectedness, whether we know it or not. I think telepathy goes on all the time and people simply do not recognize it. And if they start a journal, and in the journal they put down instances of what they think might be telepathy or some of these other experiences, they have a resource and they can go back. And the more incidents they prepare on their computer file, the more patterns they will see. And so this is a form of self-therapy that's very harmless, but very, very potentially enriching.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you one of the giants in parapsychology, Stan Krippner. He is an American psychologist and internationally recognized authority on dreams, consciousness, and anomalous experiences. He has authored or edited dozens of books exploring the boundaries of human awareness. He's the recipient of multiple Lifetime Achievement Awards, bridging scientific research and cross-cultural and indigenous perspectives. He's contributed significantly to the fields of transpersonal psychology and consciousness studies. Take a look, read his new book, A Chaotic Life, the memoirs of Stanley Krippner, pioneer humanistic psychologist. Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence, Stan.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Now, one of the things I study, Stan, is synchronicities or meaningful experiences. And your dream work suggests a kind of seriality where multiple people in different parts of the world have similar dreams. For example, in the hours and days before major earthquakes, individuals with no connection to one another have independently reported highly specific imagery: ground splitting, floors giving way, foundations failing, support structures collapsing, before they had any information about what was coming. You have cataloged these clusters. And this imagery is not emotional or vague, it's structural. The precise symbolic vocabulary of something load-bearing about to give. What do you make out of those findings across multiple dreamers?
Basically, it indicates that consciousness is fundamental, that we are immersed in a sea of consciousness, whether we know it or not, and from time to time, these events that have a strong emotional component pop up and appear, and it looks like they are independently connected, but they're not. They're connected to the very, very basic level of reality. I think that Roger Nelson's work illustrates that. He has multiple sensors, electronic devices around the world, and they have built-in devices that go back and forth between, shall we say, red and green, red and green, red and green. But every once in a while, there's more reds than green, and then What follows is a catastrophe, an earthquake, a volcanic eruption, as if the world was ready for that catastrophe. But it's not all bad news. When there is a very happy event, like a royal wedding or something like a show business event around the world, there's also more green than red or whatever. So emotion, feeling, mood is the trigger for these connections to be visible. All of this is reported in the literature. I have yet to see a knowledgeable rebuttal of it, and your viewers can simply go to the internet, type in Roger Nelson's Consciousness Research Project, and they'll have all the details. And this is just one example. One of my colleagues in our dream research, Alan Vaughan, wrote a wonderful book, Remarkable Coincidences, which is still in print. Your viewers can buy copies. Remarkable Coincidences Throughout History. Another friend of mine, Alan Combs, wrote a beautiful book on synchronicity. Of course, synchronicity differs a little bit from coincidence. Coincidence is all on the same level. But in synchronicity, there's an internal event, such as a dream, that matches an external event, such as an earthquake, shall we say. So that is what Carl Gustav Jung defined as a synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence at a very, very basic emotional level. So there you have maybe a prolonged answer to your question, but I wanted to do it justice.
Well, thank you for doing it justice, Dan. And you did. And my question remains, what is this, I'll call it medium, for lack of a better word, through which different parts of humanity, different minds of people are embedded or involved with, that allows them to feel the same thing around the same time?
The mechanism, to put it very simply, is that they are tuning in to the underlying essence of reality, the consciousness field that is with us at all times. And if you want to know what the consciousness field is, and again, I'm not an expert, but there are quantum physicists who have postulated how these fundamental fields operate and can even be measured. On a more psychological level, Carl Gustav Jung spoke about archetypes. They were basic constellations of symbols, metaphors, images that have evolved over time because they served an evolutionary purpose. And when people plug into that archetype in dreams, in emotional experiences, etc., then they make connections with other aspects of that archetype. And then they can report something that really seems to defy the laws of chance. In our dream studies, when we worked with dream telepathy, we had people try to dream about an art print, an image that somebody in a distant room or a distant city was focusing on. And we chose art prints that were very archetypal in nature, that arouse emotions, violence, love, spirituality, because those we felt would work better than a simple picture of a tree or a house which might be very beautiful, but didn't have the strong feeling that enabled the dreamer to tap into the underlying archetype.
And you're making a vital point about synchronicity, among other things, is that emotion is a driver for the potential of connection among people thinking the same thing.
Well, this is why there are so many reports of people having premonitions about loved ones being in danger, and the next day they get a phone call, oh, your loved one was almost killed in an automobile accident. Now, there's literally hundreds of examples, like this catalog by Louisa Ryan at the Ryan Research Center, and now her daughter, Sally Ryan Feather, that people have written in from all over the world. And when you look at these experiences, you find that about 60% of them took place in dreams. The rest of them took place in wakefulness, but while somebody was napping or relaxing or doing something else that did not distract them. Again, it was a testament to the two Rhines that they were able to hold this together. Your viewers can go to the book, The Gift, and will find a thorough discussion of these particular events. Let me just tell your viewers one example.
All right.
A man and woman and their daughter from very humble backgrounds were all sleeping together in the same room. They did not have a separate room for their daughter, so the infant was in a crib. And because the room was so small, there's a chandelier above the crib. They didn't think anything of it. In the middle of the night, the woman woke up. I had a terrible dream that at 2:00 in the morning, the chandelier would fall on the crib and kill our baby. Her husband, oh, it's just a dream. You're worrying too much. Go back to sleep. Instead, the woman pulled the baby out of the crib, brought the baby into their own bed, and sure enough, at 2:00 in the morning, there's a crash. That chandelier falls down on the crib. So this shows two things. The role of emotion between somebody and a loved one, and the fact that you can change. It does not completely rule out free will. In the collection of the Rhines, in more than half the cases, a tragic event was averted because people took the dream or the hunt seriously and prevented the disaster from happening. Yeah, the disaster happened, but without anybody being killed.
Yeah, and that leads to some guilt on the part of some people who have premonitions and don't do anything about it.
I think that as a result of the people listening to your podcast, they should begin to take some of these premonitions seriously.
Yeah.
Now, here's the problem. You do not know which premonitions are going to take place or are a result of your own fantasy or your own worry.
Right.
And this is a big challenge for parapsychology to determine how people can identify premonitions that can be taken seriously and which ones can be dismissed. I think that the basic clue is the more intense the emotion, the more likely the premonition is real. Again, this is an important research project. I hope that somebody will take it up and do something about it.
Yeah, the more intense emotion is a good indicator, and yes, it deserves more research. But what other indicators are there besides intense emotion, Stan?
Yes, the basic characteristics of an archetype are number one, intense emotion. Number two, intensity and the length of the premonition or the dream or the hunch. And number three, the universality of the image.
Hmm.
When I say universality, something that spans cultures, like a venerable man or woman, a wise old man, a wise old woman, or a mandala, a circular form divided into four, or a brilliant star, or a very special animal or bird. These are images that you find in all cultures, and they can be also found in archetypes. So this is another way that people can evaluate a hunch or a premonition and see if it be taken seriously. Also, another clue, if somebody has not had one of these intuitions before, that is something to be taken seriously. Some people really worry excessively. They worry all the time about their health, about their children, about their loved ones. And so when they have a premonition, it's just an example of their way of life, their mood, the way that they think.
Yeah.
But if it's something rare and unusual in a person's experience, then it's more likely to be taken seriously.
That's a very important part of synchronicity too. When something is rare, low probability, it indicates that this meaningful coincidence might be more meaningful than some of the more ordinary ones that take place. So statistics do play a role. Now, coming back to the chandelier story, which is one of my favorites also, I don't see an archetype in that chandelier premonition.
But not all premonitions involve archetypes.
All right.
Absolutely not. I would say most of them do not involve archetypes.
It was the emotion that was so intense that got the mother out of the bed to rescue the baby. And that emotion,
Right.
that
I
emotion,
mean, if you want to stretch a little bit, you can say that the mother-child connection represents an archetype. And so, again, if you want to really push the idea, there is a parent-child archetype, mother-child, father-child, etc., etc., etc. And so it might be an archetypal premonition if you want to push that idea. Sure.
okay, if you want to push it, and we just did. We pushed it far enough. Uh, one of the questions, well, another related to that, before I get that one related to that is the original definition of telepathy. That telepathy used to mean, back in the 1860s and 70s, um, feeling at a distance, tele at a distance, pathy, feeling, where you could feel that the emotions or the pain of a loved one at a distance. Now telepathy has become more cognitive, and the old definition of telepathy has kind of faded. And in what I've written about uh, I've included a new term, simulpathity, as a way of describing, naming the feeling of a loved one at a distance. What do you, what's your comments on that old definition of telepathy?
Well, the problem is that's hard to measure. Contemporary parapsychology uses definitions that can be put into experimental practice. In other words, the old definition still is valid, but in addition to that, you have more cognitive examples of telepathy, and you have cultural aspects of telepathy. And telepathy is one of the very basic phenomena that parapsychologists study. Precognition, premonition, hunch, that can be examined. That's another field of parapsychology, precognitive studies. And then there's clairvoyance, knowledge about a distant event, remote viewing. And then you have life after death, survival studies. Those are your four basic fields of parapsychology. All of them can be experimentally measured. All of them can be fields of investigation, and all of them have numerous anecdotes that could serve a purpose. So the old definitions still can be used, but they take their place in the contemporary parapsychological framework. And there are people who have established new terms, new frameworks, but they're not going to get any place unless they can provide experimental results that show that those terms are useful.
And so we run.
I've run across well-meaning people who have come up with their own definitions, their own terms, didn't get any place because they didn't provide experimental results indicating that those definitions were useful.
And anecdotes aren't enough. They're just a start, right?
Right.
Yeah. And this simulpathity thing is a name for old telepathy, but the only research I've done is surveys to see how often that happens and get some measure of that. But trying to do it in a controlled manner, the way you did your dream research, is yet to be done. So I have another question for you that's directly related to what you have just talked about. Synchronicity is not much talked about within parapsychology, and I wonder if you would comment on why that is.
I think the reason is that it doesn't appear to be particularly useful. I think that one way it could be more useful, again, is to go to the research literature. Carl Gustav Jung established synchronicity as a coincidence where an internal event, such as a dream or a hunch or a vision, matches an external event, something that happens on the visible plane. Now, there is a researcher that came up with a definition of synchronicity, and I think it was a 5-aspect definition, and then somebody else applied that definition to a series of dreams. And this proved to be very, very useful in determining which dreams could be taken seriously, not necessarily precognitively, but in terms of being useful for a person's daily life once interpreted. Now, you don't hear this talked about. I'm one of the few people that's written about this in my literature, but the definition, the research is there for anybody that really wants to put it to use. And this, by the way, is not a parapsychological study. Parapsychological aspects were not even mentioned. So there is a way it could be used if people want to be so inclined.
Well, could you elaborate on what that way might be?
You'd have to go to my articles on the topic.
Okay.
I don't know what you mean by elaboration. The
Just,
I've already mentioned the various aspects of an archetype,
yes, you have.
unusual in nature, long, emotional, universal symbolism, and
Yeah,
even, shall we say, artistic in some way or another.
yes, you have. And I want to bring us back to um, dreams and your definition with Jung of what synchronicity is, some kind of connection between what's in one's mind with what's in the external world. And your dream research with earthquakes, as an example, uh, rather rather than maybe the Roger Nelson's, which are more machine oriented, but your research with dreams, for example, show correlations between internal events and external events across large populations. That looks to me like a form of synchronicity. Now, by a form, I'm
Absolutely, yes.
it's a form because Jung was usually interested in one mind, one environment. Uh, the the idea of seriality is more here in your dreams. The idea that biologist Paul Kammerer wrote about in 1919, that he just watched series of the same things happening. And your dream research looks like Paul Kammerer, but Kammerer didn't look for parapsychological explanations. He looked for more scientific, in those days, explanations. So when we say that your dream research with earthquakes as an example is a form of synchronicity, it isn't the kind of synchronicity that Carl Jung wrote about.
Well, this is why in my writings about our dream work, I simply do not use the word synchronicity. You're right.
That's why you didn't use the term synchronicity, you said?
Now, if you look at all of my writings on our dream solving experiments, you will not find the word synchronicity.
All right.
Didn't find it a useful term.
Well, I agree because it isn't the way Jung described it and the way you earlier described it, but it is a form of meaningful coincidence in the Paul Kammerer way. And what I've
Yes.
done is make a taxonomy of synchronicity and broke it down into four categories because synchronicity is much too vague a term to be able to pin down. So we need to have various definitions so that we can then study them more clearly. I include serendipity as another form of meaningful coincidence. Happy accidents are not quite the same as mind matter connections. And seriality, like your dreams, are maybe something Jung might have gotten to, but it's a different form. It's not one mind, one event in the external world. It's different. And so if we are talking about your dreams as a form of meaningful coincidences, how do you react to that?
Well, if somebody wants to frame it that way, fine with me. I don't have any objection to it. I wouldn't do it myself, but the data are there and people can interpret them any way they want.
And so I am. And what there's another form of seriality, kind of like your dreams, that I want to see what you think about. I've noticed recently that mystical experiences are being reported with increasing frequency these days. And mystical experiences are often characterized by unity, love, interconnectedness, a sense of being ineffable, not being able to describe it in terms, in words. And these experiences, which also bring people to a sense of oneness sometimes, are increasing in reports. And the ways they seem to come about are maybe 4 or 5 different ways. And I'll mention two prominent ones. One is the increasing use of psychedelics in therapeutic ways, and also near death experiences, which are increasing because medical technology has allowed us to keep people from dying, pulling them back from the edge of death. So, psychedelics and near death experiences are examples of increases in mystical experiences. What does that mean for humanity, Stan?
Well, I think what it means is somewhat positive because these near-death experiences and these mystical experiences are generally positive, not always, generally. I think that you are right that we're having more reports because of therapeutic use and informal use of psychedelics, because psychedelics work on the brain in a way that the default mechanism, which involves our sense of identity, is shut down. The prefrontal cortex involves logical thinking is shut down. And so we have whole different ways of thinking and perceiving and feeling during psychedelics. Also, the near-death experiences, not only are more people surviving near-fatal events, but they're talking about it. In previous years, people would have these experiences. They were afraid to talk about it. People would think they're crazy.
That's right.
And so what we talk about now in increase, I think is also an increase in people's willingness to be open and talk about them, which is a good thing.
Yeah. So they're being talked about. So there are more reports, and the difference between experiencing it and hearing the reports is major. However, it's easy to say that those reports are increasing partly because the experiences are increasing. And if you go along with that assumption, Stan, I ask you to comment on what this means for humanity, that more and more people are having mystical experiences. And I'll compare them to your dream research, where multiple people have the same experience or similar experiences. We're seeing that with mystical experiences now uh, across humanity. What does that mean to you?
The people in power in the world, political leaders, financiers, etc., who control the world, should be having more mystical experiences, then the world would be better. The wrong people are having mystical experiences. The people that we would hope should have mystical experiences are the ones that rule the world, and they're not having them. So I really don't go along with the notion that the increase in mystical experiences is going to take us very far, at least not in the next several years. I think the important thing is it'll help people live better lives. It'll help them feel closer to friends and family. It'll help them feel closer to nature. It'll help on an individual level and on a small group level. And the one piece of hope that I can offer is to remind us that Margaret Mead was a great proponent of the notion that small groups of people can make decisions that can trickle up and change the world for the better. So right now we have top-down decisions, not getting us very far. But we can also work in small groups and have bottom-up decisions that will eventually make important changes. Margaret Mead was right, and she offered many examples of how community efforts paid off in the long run. I've seen this myself when small groups of people in the Philippines instituted a revolution that restored democracy to that country. It did not happen top down, it happened from bottom up. Other examples abound, of course. The conservation effort is basically a bottom-up phenomenon. You did not have the world leaders say, well, we've got to save the planet, we've got to plant more trees, we've got to clean up the water. It was a grassroots level, starting with Rachel Carson, etc., that bubbled up from the bottom up and forced the changes. So that's the one piece of hope that I would offer.
One of the other problems I see currently is the difficulty human beings are having in getting along with each other. That social media, propaganda, many other influences are making it difficult yet more for people to connect with each other, to work with each other. Just even the small groups you're talking about, it's important to not just have an idea, but to be able to work cohesively together. And I'm seeing that it's more and more difficult to get people to work together when they are distracted by so many social media inputs and other concerns.
You are absolutely right. You have really hit the nail on the head.
Thank you.
In the United States and elsewhere in the world, there's really an epidemic of loneliness. People are not making connections that would nurture them. And people, as you say, are distracted. And so many of the relationships are with people that they never see because they're on social media.
Yeah.
How is that going to nurture emotional connection? How is that going to, in the long run, prevent the feelings of loneliness and isolation and estrangement? So the social media is a two-edged sword. Yeah, there's many advantages of the social media, and I use social media myself for specific purposes, but there's also the fact that people spend so much time on the social media, they don't have time for real life person-to-person connections.
Well, we both agree on that observation, as do many other people. And I think parapsychological research can help us in trying to be able to get people face to face interactions. And I think recognizing telepathy is a key part of what we have already going with us, that we can do telepathy at a distance, but we also can do it in conversations in the present.
Very astute observation. I certainly agree with that. And again, the more publicity that's given to telepathy in the result, the more people will acknowledge that and take it seriously in their own lives. Again, many people block these experiences because they think that their friends and neighbors will think they're eccentric or crazy or whatever. But once there's more mainstream acceptance of telepathy, near-death experiences, mystic experiences, people will take them seriously and integrate them into their own lives. They'll be kinder to people. They'll be more careful with nature. They'll live lives that are less materialistic and more creative and more satisfying.
Well, your aims, your end result, yes. And the means, mystical experiences, telepathy, among others, are beginnings. But there's still a connection because people are afraid, as you know better than I, of telepathic connections because they're afraid sometimes that their minds are being invaded by somebody else or their minds will be invaded by somebody else. How do you address that fear?
Accurate information. And you're absolutely right. Some people become very paranoid and they, oh, good heavens, if telepathy is real, other people know what I'm thinking. I won't have any privacy.
Yeah.
And this, yeah, you're absolutely right. Of course, this is completely irrational, but it can be countered by accurate information. I've even had people accuse me of reading their minds or engaging in mind control.
Yeah. Eh, And again, I think there's so much in parapsychological research that can help us interpersonally to form those small groups that you so clearly defined as useful in transformation of major parts of what we need to do something about. So, how would we train people to be able to use telepathy in conversations? And why would we just start with why would we want to encourage in person telepathy? Why would we want to encourage that uh, in connections with other people?
Good heavens, there are any number of programs going on that do exactly that, if people are so inclined. The Monroe Institute has a program. For example, Institute of Noetic Sciences has a program. There are different types of seminars at SM Institute and some of the centers that are doing this. Of course, that only applies to very, very small groups. But if people are so inclined, the resources are there and they can use the resources and their internet programs also. I would say that they could go to the Institute and look up Stephen Schwartz, and they will find his courses on exactly that, on bringing connectedness and parapsychological studies into their own lives and creating a sense of wonder that can sustain them. And that's basically an internet course. They can also go to the internet and look at Jeffrey Mishloff, and they will find his program associated with the California Institute for Human Science that has online courses to do exactly that, help people use the findings of parapsychology to enhance their personal life. So the resources are there for people that are so inclined.
And it's the so inclined that I'm asking about. If we were to do an ad campaign or something more muted than that, how would we say telepathy is going to be helpful for you interpersonally?
I think the answer would be very simple. Telepathy demonstrates a connectedness, whether we know it or not. I think telepathy goes on all the time and people simply do not recognize it. And if they go to their computer and start a journal. And in the journal, they put down instances of what they think might be telepathy or some of these other experiences. They have a resource and they can go back. And the more incidents they prepare on their computer file, the more patterns they will see. And so this is a form of self-therapy that's very harmless, but very, very potentially enriching. We call it journaling. And journaling can be done pencil and paper, but nowadays it's more frequently done on the computer.
Yeah, that journaling has saved me when I was in high school. Uh, it's so important to get it out there. Now people are journaling on AI chats. Uh, that's a little different because they're getting responses now that are potentially problematic and having experiences sometimes that it appears to some people that the chat is reading their minds.
Oh, good heavens, that reminds me of something. Artificial intelligence can create companions for people. And for some people, these imaginary companions can be very useful, can reduce the loneliness. But every now and again, the companion gives bad advice, especially for young people. And there's any number of young people who have taken their own lives because their artificial intelligence companion told them to do so.
Yeah.
So the guidelines are very necessary if you want to use computers for this particular purpose. I think that artificial intelligence can serve very, very useful functions. I use it myself from time to time, but I would never think of creating an imaginary companion.
No, you wouldn't, but they do. And my question is a little more specific. Um, you know the Division of Perceptual Studies, Bruce Grayson and
Yes.
others there. You know them quite well, I imagine. And I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia, not too far from the Monroe Institute. And I go to Division of Perceptual Studies meetings when I can and they're open. And last year, I gave a talk about the book I'm writing called Therapy for Humanity, which is why I've asked you about parapsychological contributions to interpersonal relationships. During that meeting, a woman who I found out later was quite psychic uh, came up to me and said, ChatGPT reads my mind. What do you think of comments like that?
Oh, good heavens. Demonstrates the need for education. Good grief. I like the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia, and I followed their work ever since Ian Stevenson started it up decades ago. And I'm working with them right now because I'm involved in studying a young girl who has past life memories of a close personal friend of mine.
Oh,
And yes, and so the Division of Personal Studies is giving guidelines to her parents so that the girl is very accepting of these connections. And I also reassured them your daughter is very young, 5 years of age. The literature indicates that once she reaches the age of 7 or 8, these memories will dissipate because of socialization, because she'll be going to school. So let's just make this a pleasant experience for her. Keep records that can be used for research, and your daughter will be just fine.
good. One of the presentations this year at DOPS, Division of Perceptual Studies, was by William Peters on shared death experiences. Uh, he and his crew interviewed me during the time they were here on they're doing a documentary on shared death experiences because I was age 31 and choking uncontrollably in San Francisco, and 3,000 miles away in Wilmington, Delaware, my father was choking on his own blood and dying. That was a shared death experience, and about 15% of people seem to have that form of shared death experiences. The more common one is actually a kind of an NDE, where the person who's still here, not dying, goes along with the shared death, with shares the death experience of the person who's dying, and then gets to a wall where the dying person goes past it and the living person comes back. It's that time that they share so much together, where they get to know each other in a way they didn't know each other in the three-dimensional reality that they had both existed. That seems to me to be another clue for how we can help humanity increase capacities for understanding, kindness, connection, and empathy.
That is a good clue. And I think your book will be very important. I hope it comes out soon. It's something that the world needs. I hope it gets maximum publicity, because what you're talking about is right on target.
Well, the fundamental idea of it, Stan, is that humanity enters therapy, and the therapist says, "How come you're here?" And humanity says, "I don't want to be here." And the therapist says, "So why are you here?" And humanity says, "My partner told me to come." And humanity's and therapist says, "Who's your partner?" And humanity says, "Gaia." She said, "I can live without you, but you can't live without me." So the focus of the book is humanity connecting much better with nature, something that you have mentioned several times today, which I was delighted to hear. That we need to come together as one human being is the hypothesis I'm making, and that human being, the collective human organism, becomes part of Gaia again because we already are.
Well, absolutely. And this is something I had learned from all of these shamans I've interviewed and worked with. And they keep repeating the notion that humanity, not all humanity, but big chunks of humanity, are on their own track. They think that they're in control of nature.
Right.
And they even go back to religious sources that say, well, humans are in control. They can use the earth any way they want because
Yep.
they dominate the earth. Completely wrong. Humans are part of the earth. They're part of Gaia. They're part of nature. And the closer humans get to nature, the better. And humans can do this not only by walking in nature, forests, trees, mountains, deserts, rivers, by bringing nature into their homes. I always have a living plant in my home, for example. Also, people have pets. They can learn from the pets. And the pets have something to teach them if they're only open to that. Birds, cats, horses, dogs, etc. Yes, wonderful pets that don't dominate the pet. See what you can learn from the pet. And so the human nature connection is so essential to survival. And in transpersonal psychology, we talk about somebody expanding beyond the so-called ego, and it's often talked about expanding into celestial areas. And I say, fine, but people should also expand into the deep archetypal level. They should expand horizontally into nature. And I think that transpersonal psychology is a good vehicle to help people realize that.
I'm going to add something to the horizontal connection. Uh, I'm suggesting that humanity is one being, the collective human organism. and that we can talk about spiritual elevation. We can necessarily talk about increasing connection with Gaia, which we already have with nature, but it's the connection with each other, that feeling that each of us has that we're part of something greater. I'm with you on being here on Earth and saying that something greater is not just nature, not just Gaia, but each other. We're part of humanity.
Well, I certainly agree with you on that. You've got the right language to describe that. And I think that that is something that, again, transpersonal psychology and some of our movements can help us realize.
Well, would you tell us how transpersonal psychology does connect people as humanity, as like the one being that's like tromping on our habitat right now, knocking out Gaia in ways that is self-destructive? How does transpersonal psychology help us with that?
I think that transpersonal psychology can pull upon the research that supports that. We've been talking about the research today, like the Roger Nelson research,
Yeah.
the Division of Perceptual Skills, Division of Perceptual Studies research, the writings of Carl Gustav Jung and other visionaries, the work of ecological pioneers such as Jane Goodall, who emphasized the connection with other animals and nature. I mean, we have so many resources to use, and it makes me sick to look upon the contemporary scene where these absolutely useless wars are taking place,
Yeah.
where financial gain is elevated above humanity.
Yes.
The rich people are getting richer in this world of crisis. And the ordinary people, the poor, the middle class people, are stagnating.
Hmm.
It's a world which is in stark contrast to the whole notion of what you've been talking about, of what I'm talking about, of the connection that humans have with each other.
Well, that's the pragmatic part of what I am doing, Stan, is trying to use ideas from parapsychology and other places, anthropology, all kinds of places, Gregory Bateson, to put them together in a practical way. I'm a psychiatrist. I've done a lot of psychotherapy, written a couple of books on psychotherapy, and I'm trying to apply psychotherapeutic principles to humanity in a way that allows people, shows people, suggests how we as individual cells, now increasingly isolated, can become more part with each other. And the shared death experience is just one wonderful example of the mutuality that is potentially there for all of us, and the really enjoyment and evolution that is possible by connections with each other.
More power to you. And again, your viewers might check out some books. There are two books, The Conscious Universe, one written by Dwayne Eldrin and one written by Dean Radin. Both of them show this unity you've been talking about, and both of them pull upon parapsychological studies, which is why parapsychological studies, too often ignored, can now be a positive resource in terms of creating a better world and more personal connections.
And I'm glad this, I know, and I'm glad to hear you mention the work that's being done to strengthen interpersonal connections. So we've come to the end of our time together, and I remind our listeners and our viewers to get a better look, even more, Stan Krippner and his life. Look at his book, A Chaotic Life, the memoirs of Stanley Krippner, pioneering humanistic psychology. So, Stan, what would you like to leave our audience with as we say goodbye?
Okay, that's a good question. Off the top of my head, I would say that so much of our life is controlled, and we can't make decisions because the decisions are already made for us. But when we are able to make decisions, think of what decisions will bring more love into the world and bring more wisdom into the world. Don't make decisions based on power or prestige. That gets us nowhere. Make decisions based on the connectedness that we've been talking about in the podcast today.
Thank you very much for the experience of connecting with you, Stan. It's been a delight for me.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.